Okay, so today on Rods, Rides, and Wrenches, we're working on the BMW GS again. And I was out for a ride earlier this week and filled up with fuel, and all of a sudden could smell fuel very, very strong. Thought maybe the vent cap on the fuel tank was open, but that wasn't the case. In fact, we had a fuel leak, and then we had to go find that fuel leak. And I'm going to show you where it's leaking from, and it should look pretty clear. So I'm just going to start the bike so that you can see the fuel leak. And you see I don't even get the bike started. You can see the fuel just spraying up from this quick release fuel delivery system that the BMW has. And this, I wasn't aware at the time. I now know that it is a known issue on these GS's. This fitting that's in here typically only lasts about 30,000 kilometers, and it wears out. It is made of plastic, both in the tank and on the fuel inlet that goes into the fuel injection system regulator. So this is an issue. This part is completely wore out, so we needed to find a replacement, and needed to find a replacement quickly. So that's what we did. So here's our replacement part. I ordered it from a company out of the United States called Beamer Boneyard. I found these guys online, and although they primarily sell used BMW parts, they also supply some new ones, including this fitting right here, which is the one we need. This is the one that will go into the fuel delivery line to the fuel injection system. And this is the one that goes into the fuel tank. So if you look down in there, you'll see that there's an O-ring in this fitting. And I don't necessarily see that in the stock fitting. We'll get it out and double check it. This is the 90-degree fitting that goes in, like I said, into the fuel delivery line. These two things go together like so and lock in place, and should be a very secure fuel delivery line. Okay, so those are our two key components. Also in here is a little bit of thread compound that's designed to work with fuel. This is a hose clamp, and that's designed to work with high pressure lines. And also in there is some instructions on how to put this all together. So this kit runs less than $100 US. I had it express freighted up, so it was a little more expensive, especially when you convert it to Canadian dollars. But as opposed to the stock plastic fittings, these fittings last a whole lot longer. And also in this package is some extra O-rings as well, which I haven't shown here. So looking forward to getting this replacement fitting in and stopping that fuel leak. So per the instructions in the kit, we're going to start by draining out most of the fuel in the tank, or as much as we can, to fill this jerry can. And the reason that you have to do that is you want to get as much of the fuel away from the fitting at the top as possible. So we've opened the garage doors for some ventilation. We've got our siphon hose here, and we're going to siphon out as much gas as we can. Okay, with the fuel removed from the tank, or at least as much as possible, I'm just going to clean up this area where we had fuel spray out in our demonstration. And the quick release mechanism on the BMW bike is pretty easy to do. It's just this little tab right here, and I think you can see that. It's right in there, and you just push that tab back, and up comes the fuel line. It's off, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is remove this fitting from our fuel line, and it's kind of congested in here. I'm not gonna lie. It's gonna be a little difficult to get off, but you know, if you wanted to, you could take this top panel off and get yourself a little bit more access to this space here. Okay, so with all the screws out of this top cover right here, we're going to take it off, and one of the things I just want to point out is you don't have to take the aluminum panels off in order to get this off, but you do have to remove all the screws. Of course, you have to remove the seat, and you do have to unscrew all of the bolts holding the fuel cap on. And although it's two pieces, it comes apart basically as you know, it comes off the bike basically as one piece, and then you can take the fuel cap out and put it back in place, just to protect yourself from any excess fuel getting out of the bike. So we're just going to put that back up there. So that gave us a little bit more visibility on the fitting itself that we have to remove. Now, this rubber piece is held in place with two hose clamps, and these clamps are crimped, so they're sacrificial. In other words, you have to break them in order to get them off. So by taking a pair of pliers and compressing that fitting, okay, to open it up, you should be able to get these types of fuel line clamps. There you see it's opened up some, right? Should be able to get that loose enough to come off now. With a little bit of patience and some forceful manipulation. So we're able to get that fitting out of there. So now it's time to remove this fitting down here. This is the one that's in the fuel tank. And for that, you're going to need to get a wrench on it and start to unthread it. And this should come out fairly easy. And there you go, that's that one. That's what that one looks like. So per the instructions, what we want to do is dry off this area as much as possible. We want the thread locking compound that's supplied with the kit to set up and adhere, and it'll do a much better job if there isn't any fuel down in this area to contaminate it. So we're going to go ahead and put our new metal fitting here in the top, and before we do anything, we've got to make sure that we get our clamp on. Make sure it's positioned so that you can easily access it with the screwdriver in order to tighten it up. Slide that clamp back, and we're going to slide the fitting into the hose as far as it'll go, okay? So all the way down to the end. And then we'll get our screwdriver out and back the clamp off so we can get it over onto the fitting. Slide that guy up. You want to leave the clamp, basically you want to make sure that the clamp is securely on the fitting at both sides, right? But you don't want to run it all the way up to the very top of the fitting. You just want to have it sit back a couple of millimeters, 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch at minimum, and tighten that guy up. So when you tighten this down, you want to make sure it is snug. And the clamp's going to deform a little bit, but again, you're on a metal fitting in there, so you shouldn't have to worry too much about breaking it. Alright, so I'm happy with that. The new fitting's in place, it's positioned correctly, so we're just going to set that to the side, and we're going to prep the piece that goes in the fuel tank. So what we're going to do now is take our thread sealing compound and place it on the threads of the fitting, and we want to make sure that we get enough of it on, but per the instructions here, we're also going to let this set up a little bit, become a little bit tacky before we actually put it onto the motorcycle. So while we're waiting for the thread locker to set up, and the instructions recommend 30 minutes, we're going to move over to the other part of this kit, which is the fitting for the fuel return line.
So the fitting that we're working on already is the delivery fuel line, the one that goes, like I said, into the fuel injection system. And this fitting here is for the fuel return. And you see it's made of brass, coated in nickel as well. And this fitting goes onto the other side of the fuel delivery system. Basically, when excess fuel is not needed by the fuel injection system, it's returned back to the fuel tank. And we're going to take a look at that and work on that fitting now. Okay, so here's where the return fuel delivery line sits and lives. And it's this hose right here. Underneath here is the quick release for this return line. And we're just going to pull this out, pull it forward, and press the release button and pull the hoses apart. And you saw there was a little bit of fuel that came out, so we're just going to clean that up. Now I'm going to take this foam off and save it. If we take a look at the actual O-ring that's in here, we'll see that it's a little wore. So we might as well, although this wasn't leaking, we might as well change these guys out at the same time, and that way we know we have basically the weakest links in the fuel delivery system right here taken care of. And the last thing we want is to get that other fitting changed, come around and go for a ride coming around on this side and wind up with some fuel leaking as well. So this hose over here is restricted a little bit by the stay mount, so we're just gonna have to pull that out, pull it back, and then pull it out, and then we can get good access to it. So let's grab our tools and have at it. So we're working on this part of the fuel return line, and even though we've drained quite a bit of fuel from the tank, there's still some in the tank, particularly at this low level. So I'm just going to use a set of vice grips to clamp off the fuel line here. Okay, so now that this fitting's on and tightened up, we can go ahead and release our vice grip, and we shouldn't have any fuel leaks. So I'm going to go ahead and put that foam back on. It's going to be a little more difficult because we've got a bigger clamp this time to go on it, and we're just covering up that clamp. So I positioned this clamp so that when it's protruding out from the bike, which is a little different than the one on the other side. So now we've got both fittings together, we can go ahead and push them in. You heard that click, nice and solid, and that should be all we need on this side. So our thread lock compound has gotten tacky. It's been about 30 minutes per the instructions of what it is we're supposed to do here. We're going to go ahead and thread this into the fuel tank, and again, just want to make sure that there's absolutely no fuel around these threads before we put this in. So what we want to do is get this finger tight. And one of the things that you got to be aware of if you're putting in one of these metal fittings is that the receiving end down here in the fuel tank is still made of plastic. So one of the risks that you have in using this system is that you can crack this component down here in the fuel pump that it's threading into. And you don't want to do that. That would be super expensive to replace. So we've got it finger tight, and what the instructions say now is to just give it a 1/2 to 3/4 turn. We see that we've got the quick release kind of in the upright position or 12 o'clock position, and we're just going to get it down probably only to about 1/2. I feel some resistance there, and that way we still have good access to the quick release. So there is a 1/2 turn, and I am happy with that. We're going to leave that alone. So We've replaced all the fittings on the bike, and the instructions also say that we need to leave this now for 24 hours, or at least until the morning. And that's what we're going to do. We want to give that thread locking compound ample time to set up and dry before we put any fuel through the system. So we're going to shut the cameras off, put the rest of the bike back together, and come back in the morning, check our work.